The moment hangs in the air, thick with the scent of champagne and roses. Across the room, my brother's new wife Anna, a woman with more courage than anyone in my family, lifts her glass. Her eyes, steady and determined, find mine. I give her the smallest, most imperceptible nod. The murmur of the crowd dies down as she speaks, her voice cutting through the noise with a clear, ringing purpose. And before I finish, I want to make a special toast to a woman whose quiet strength is the bedrock of this nation's security. I see my father, Robert, a retired Army colonel who lives in the past, puff out his chest. He smirks, soaking in what he believes is reflected glory. Anna's gaze doesn't waver. To General Garcia. Just 1 hour earlier, I was standing by the bar, watching the same man hold court. He was flanked by business associates, his voice booming as he retold an old story. He saw me and gestured dismissively, a familiar flick of the wrist that had been erasing me my whole life. "And that's my daughter, Elena," he announced to the group, his laugh laced with casual cruelty. "She's just the family's mistake. Got some little IT job for the government." I felt the words land like tiny, sharp stones. I saw the 20 years of being overlooked. The praise lavished on my brother Mark, the family's golden boy, for every minor achievement while my own were met with silence. "We were all Army in this family, you see," my father continued. Her brother Mark, now he got it right. My face remained a mask of polite indifference, a mask I had perfected over decades. But inside, a cold, precise anger began to solidify. I noticed one of the men in my father's circle, a prominent CEO from a major aerospace contractor, flinch. His eyes flickered towards me with a look of dawning horror and respect. He knew, of course. He had to know. His company had a multi-billion-dollar proposal sitting on my desk, waiting for my final sign-off. My father, in his bottomless arrogance, had just committed a catastrophic error. He hadn't just insulted his daughter, he had insulted a 4-star general, in front of a man whose entire future could depend on her goodwill. He thought he was defining me. He had no idea he was defining his own irrelevance. My father had always used public moments to put me in my place. He had no idea he'd just done it in front of the one man who understood. The difference between a colonel's pension and a general's authority. To understand the toast that would end his reign, you have to understand the two worlds I was forced to live in. To truly understand the chasm between the person they saw and the person I was, you have to understand the stories my family told themselves. At the center of it all was my father, Robert, a retired colonel who clung to his past glory like a life raft. His entire sense of self was built on a foundation of rugged, traditional masculinity, and he saw his legacy not in me, but in my brother. Then there was Mark, the family's golden boy, who wasn't a bad person. Not really. He was just weak. A man who had so thoroughly absorbed my father's worldview that he never thought to question it. To him, my life was a quiet, gray little thing, unimportant because it wasn't loud and shiny like his. I remember one Christmas, the memory so sharp it still cuts. Mark, then a junior associate at some soulless investment firm, was given a Rolex for a minor promotion. The whole family oohed and awed as he strapped the gleaming metal to his wrist. Later, I quietly opened my gift. It was a generic gift card to a department store. "We just never know what to get you," my mother had said with a helpless shrug. It wasn't just the gift card, it was the PhD. I'd earned that same year, celebrated with a polite, dismissive nod. It was the years of my father patting me on the head when I tried to explain my work, saying, "That's nice, honey. Now let the men talk about real strategy." He even had a nickname for me, one he'd use at barbecues and holiday dinners with a wink and a chuckle. Ellie the admin. That was the story they told. But there was another story, one they couldn't even begin to comprehend. While they were celebrating stock dividends and golf handicaps, I was in a different world entirely. A world of silence and immense, crushing weight. I lived my real life inside sensitive compartmented information facilities, SCIFs we called them, windowless rooms, shielded from all outside signals, where the only light came from the glow of massive holographic maps displaying the state of the world in real time. In that silent, sterile world, I wasn't Ellie the admin. I wasn't anyone's mistake. I was in command. I'd stand before those maps, surrounded by the sharpest minds in the nation, and I would make decisions that rippled across continents. I'd brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff via secure video link, my voice calm and steady as I laid out the facts. We have a critical degradation in the Aegis constellation over the south. China Sea, I'd say, the words precise and stripped of all emotion. I'm recommending we initiate Protocol Phoenix to activate the dark satellites. The temporal window is 12 minutes. In those rooms, there was no room for ego or family drama. There was only the mission. There was only the cold, hard calculus of action and consequence. My mentor was General Thompson, a 4-star commander who had seen everything twice. He was a man who didn't waste words and who suffered no fools. He never called me Elena. He called me by my call sign, Oracle. He gave it to me himself after my strategic foresight had quietly averted 2 separate, international incidents, crises the public would never even know had happened. He saw something in me my own father refused to see. Not a daughter, not a woman in a man's world, but a weapon. A strategic asset. The respect I had in that world was absolute, earned not through birthright or bluster, but through quiet, relentless competence. And then there was Anna. She was the one who stumbled into my secret world by accident, and in doing so, changed everything. During the wedding planning, she hit a wall. A massive, bureaucratic, unmovable wall. The historic estate she'd booked for the venue bordered a military base, and just weeks before the wedding, the FAA had declared a new, permanent no-fly zone over the area. A classified military exercise was scheduled for the exact day of the wedding. Anna was in tears when she told me about it, explaining how officials had told her the issue was completely non-negotiable. She came to me thinking my little government job might mean I knew something about filling out the right forms or getting the right person on the phone. I saw the genuine panic and distress in her eyes. I saw the kindness she had always shown me, a kindness that was so absent in my own family, and I made a decision. I looked at her and said simply, "Let me make a call." I stepped away, and from my secure phone, I made one call to one person. 20 minutes later, Anna's phone rang. It was the base commander himself, personally calling to apologize for the inconvenience. He informed her that a temporary flight corridor exception had been authorized. For her wedding, a direct order that had come down from Strategic Command. Just before he hung up, he added, "General Garcia sends her best wishes for your big day." Anna was stunned into silence. She connected the dots in an instant. Later that day, she came to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just looked at me. Utterly. Looked at me. For the first time. In that moment, a quiet, unspoken alliance was forged between us. A bond, built on the truth my own family had spent a lifetime trying to ignore. She saw past the daughter, past the sister, and saw the general. For 20 years, I had tried to earn my father's respect in his world, by his rules. Anna was the first person from that world to see me for who I am in mine. She saw the power I held, and she realized what I was slowly beginning to accept. My father didn't respect people. He only respected rank. After my father's performance at the cocktail hour, I slipped away. I found Anna in the bridal suite, her face flushed with a righteous anger that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. She was pacing back and forth, furious on my behalf, ready to go to war for me. I, on the other hand, was perfectly still. The familiar, hot sting of humiliation had been replaced by something else. Something cold, clear, and absolutely final. All the years of being diminished, all the condescending pats on the head, all the casual dismissals, they had finally reached a critical mass. This was no longer about winning an argument or hoping for an apology. Revenge is an emotional, messy affair. This was going to be a strategic correction. Anna and I had already planned for her to mention me in her toast, a simple, kind thank you for helping with the venue. But now, The objective had changed. This was no longer about gratitude. It was about a permanent and public recalibration of my family's entire power structure. It wouldn't be an attack, but a simple, undeniable revelation of fact. We weren't going to raise our voices or cause a scene. We were going to use the system, the very formality of the event, against the person who valued appearances above all else. My father was about to learn a lesson in a language he couldn't ignore. My role in this operation wasn't to act, but to prepare the battlefield. I took out my phone, my fingers moving with calm precision. I found the number of the aerospace CEO my father had so brazenly insulted me in front of. My message was brief and direct. Mr. Thompson, I trust you will maintain professional discretion regarding my father's commentary. My recommendation for Project Chimera remains unaffected. Enjoy the evening. It was a power move, pure and simple. I was reassuring him that his multi-billion-dollar project was safe, while simultaneously reminding him of the immense authority I held. He was now a silent, observant witness to the coming reckoning. I then gave Anna her final briefing, my one and only piece of strategic advice. Don't mention the base, the no-fly zone, or any of the specifics, I told her, my voice low and steady. He won't understand the details, just use the title. The rank is all he understands. I was giving her the key, the one word that would unlock his entire fragile worldview and shatter it completely. We would let his own ignorance and arrogance become the weapons that defeated him. We would let him fill in the blanks, and in doing so, he would author his own humiliation. My father believed battles were won with loud voices and grand gestures. I learned in my world that the most devastating moves are the quietest. The invitations had been sent. The guests were seated. The ceremony was about to begin, right on my schedule. The reception hall was a masterpiece of calculated elegance, all gilded chairs and soaring floral arrangements designed to project an image of effortless success. From my seat at a secondary table, a place for distant cousins and assorted family footnotes, I had a perfect view of the main stage. My father, Robert, was at the head table, basking in the glow. He wasn't just the father of the groom, he was the master of ceremonies, the patriarch, accepting congratulations as if he were the one who had just gotten married. My brother, Mark, sat beside his new bride, blissfully happy and completely oblivious, floating in the bubble my father had so carefully constructed for him. I watched them, a ghost at their feast, and felt the familiar quiet ache of my own invisibility. The toasts began, a predictable parade of sentiment and awkward humor. The best man, one of Mark's college friends, told a clumsy, joke-filled story that fell flat. The maid of honor, Anna's younger sister, was sweet and sentimental, her voice thick with happy tears. The room was warm, lulled into a comfortable, unsuspecting state. And then, Anna stood up. She was poised, beautiful, and a vision of bridal perfection. But as I watched her take the microphone, I saw something else in her eyes, a glint of steel. The room quieted, and she began to speak. She started conventionally enough, thanking her parents, her new in-laws, and all the guests for sharing in their special day. She spoke lovingly of Mark, her voice filled with genuine affection. Then, her tone shifted. It became more formal, more serious. A hush fell over the room as she paused, her gaze sweeping across the crowd before landing deliberately on me. Growing up, you hear stories about heroes, she began, her voice resonating with a newfound gravity. People who work in the shadows, who sacrifice everything without any expectation of recognition. You assume they are strangers, distant figures. You never imagine you might be welcoming one into your family. I could feel my father preening, assuming she was about to launch into a flowery tribute to his long-finished military career. But Anna's focus remained locked on me. This family is blessed with a true, quiet hero, she continued, her voice unwavering. My father-in-law likes to call her the family's mistake. But I've learned that in the rooms where the fate of nations is debated, they have another name for her. A flicker of confusion crossed my father's face. He didn't understand. He was still smiling, but the smile was becoming fixed, uncertain. He was a man who had only ever read the first page of a book, and he couldn't comprehend that there might be other chapters. Then came the moment of impact. Anna raised her glass high, her voice like a clarion call, clear and sharp and utterly undeniable. "So I ask you all to stand with me and toast not just the woman she is, but the leader she has become." To General Elena Garcia, the silence that followed was a physical thing, a sudden, shocking void. And then, something remarkable happened. Throughout the room, men and women began to stand. Not all of them, but a significant number. I recognized some of them. A congressman who was a family friend, a few retired officers who had served with my father, and of course, the aerospace CEO, who was one of the first on his feet, his expression grimly respectful. It was a conditioned reflex, an instinctive show of respect for a rank that commanded it. They were standing for me. I watched my father. The champagne glass in his hand froze halfway to his lips. The words, General Garcia, seemed to hang in the air around him, refusing to be processed. His eyes darted from me to the standing guests and back to me. His mind, so rigid and certain, was short-circuiting. It was impossible. His mistake, his little Ellie the admin, the family's quiet failure. A general officer? The entire architecture of his world, the carefully constructed hierarchy, where he sat at the top, was crumbling around him in real time. I saw my brother Mark, his face a mask of utter bewilderment. He looked from his new wife to me, and then to his father, desperately searching for an explanation, for someone to tell him what was happening. But no one could. The color drained from my father's face, leaving behind a mottled purple rage born of pure, undiluted humiliation. He was trapped. A king suddenly revealed to be a court jester in front of his entire kingdom. He had been publicly confronted with a truth so absolute, so irrefutable that it shattered not just his perception of me, but his perception of himself. The patriarch had been dethroned. The man who had spent a lifetime making me feel small had been rendered insignificant with just 2 words. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply sat there, in the quiet, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. My father had spent my entire life lecturing me about the chain of command. In the end, it took just 2 words from a woman he barely knew for him to finally understand who salutes who. The rest of the wedding reception was a strange, disjointed affair. The music played on, people continued to dance, but the energy at the head table had collapsed into a black hole of awkwardness. My father, Robert, didn't speak another word for the rest of the evening. He just sat there, a statue of a man, his face a thunderous mask of impotent rage. He and my mother left early, a quiet, ignominious retreat that was a stark departure from the grand, backslapping exit he had surely envisioned for himself. The king had fled his own castle. My brother Mark tried to approach me once, his face a confused jumble of questions he didn't know how to ask, but he couldn't get close. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded, but it wasn't by family. It was by a new circle, a small crowd that had formed around my table. The aerospace CEO was there, as was a congressman who had been a guest of the bride's family. A few other veterans who had been in attendance joined them. Their posture straightened, their eyes filled with a new, profound respect. We didn't talk about the toast, or my father, or anything personal. We talked about policy. We talked about geostrategy. We talked about the future of satellite technology, in the middle of my family's biggest party, in the very room where I had been dismissed as a mistake. I had finally found my people. 6 months later, the world had shifted on its axis. My world, at least. I stood in a state-of-the-art command center at Vandenberg Space Force Base, the air, humming with the quiet, focused energy of professionals at the top of their game. On the polished glass door to my office, the inscription was simple, but it held the weight of my entire life's journey, Commanding General, Space Delta 5, E. Garcia. This was my new home. This was my real family. A family forged not by blood and obligation, but by meritocracy, mutual trust, and a shared solemn duty. When I led a briefing, my team listened with rapt attention, their focus absolute. Here. My voice mattered. Here. I was not an administrator. I was Oracle. One afternoon, as I was looking out my office window at the launch pads that scarred the horizon, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a text from Mark. I hadn't heard from him since the wedding. I read the words, and a strange, hollow feeling settled in my chest. Anna told me everything, it read. Dad won't talk about it. He sold the house. They're moving. I don't know what to say. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. There was no anger. There was no surge of triumph. There was just a quiet, profound sense of an ending. A chapter of my life had closed, not with a bang, but with a sad, final whisper. I thought about all the years I had craved a message like this. An acknowledgement, an apology, a simple question. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, rehearsed the things I would say, the grievances I would air. But now that it was here, I felt nothing. The need for their validation had simply evaporated. My world was no longer defined by their opinions or their absence. My world was here, in this office, with the weight of responsibility on my shoulders and the limitless expanse of the sky in front of me. My peace was no longer a negotiation, it was a fact. I placed the phone face down on my desk, the unread message glowing in the dark, and turned back to the launch manifest on my screen. I had work to do. My father believed legacy was the name you were given. I discovered it's the title you earn when no one is watching. If you've ever had to build your own worth in silence, share your story in the comments. Here, your rank is always recognized.